Right. Okay. Let's begin. So today we're talking about Alexander Alekhine, and if you want to get a Russian really riled up, you say Alekhine like I just did, and then a guy like Kostya Kavutsky will get on you, and he'll say no, it's Alyoshin or something like that. But then even when you do it, they're still going to tell you you do it wrong.
Alekhine.
So there's no way to ever do it right. So that's why we're just settling on Alekhine. So I'm going to blabber a little bit, but first what I'd like to do is just introduce this position so I can talk a little bit about Alekhine and you guys can think about what's going on here. So this is in fact white to move. And the question that I will ask is who is better and why? And I'm going to blabber just a little bit. So if you would like me to call on you, if you have strong feelings about who's better and why, then put an exclam into the chat box and I'll call on you in a little bit. So you have a little bit of time to think about it too. Again, it's white to move. Okay, so we're talking about Alekhine, and one funny thing that I really didn't even appreciate until kind of recently is that the guy was only a couple years younger than Capablanca, even though in my mind Capablanca is so much older. And the reason for that is Alekhine's career starts later, and it's because of the First World War. The dude just has a really rough time of it, man, a really rough time. So I'm going to say a couple books that are really cool that I know you guys don't read books these days, but I'm just going to throw it out there in case you're interested. One of the greatest chess books of all time is called New York 1924. It's a tournament book that Alekhine wrote. He wrote his best games, also considered a classic book. And just for stories about Alekhine, Kasparov's has this huge section on him in My Great Predecessors that's pretty well written, especially in regards to just understanding what was going on in the guy's life and his chess career. Another book that I'm going to recommend is this book here, Endgame Strategy. And a couple great Alekhine examples are from this book, including this game here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take today, and there's so much you could talk about with Alekhine. And I'm just going to put it in my own words as a summary of what I think. What I think Alekhine does is Alekhine is the first to appreciate initiative and compensation in what I'm going to call a modern way. And what I mean by that is before Steinitz, where things got really dull for a while, the game was very sacrificial and gung-ho, but not with a foundation. And that's what Alekhine is, I think, going to bring to the table. And if I don't know if they're going to let me give this lecture a title, but to me, it would be playing the end game like a boss. Playing the end game like a boss. Alekhine, man, oh, dude. Some of these end games I'm going to show you guys today, absolutely amazing. And it is, I think, reflective of a new way of thinking about the game. Okay. So why don't I call on somebody? I'll say a little bit more about Alekhine in a second here. And Austin's going to say a word or two about this position. Austin, what do you got for us?
I think white is better because obviously your rook's on the d file.
Mm-hmm.
And black's king is kind of weak because the g pawn is missing. So the e7 square particularly and the h6 square are really weak.
Okay.
And also the bishop on e7 doesn't really have a good square besides c5.
Okay, good. And just to ask, do you have an intuition about what white should do on the very first move?
Well, I was thinking of bishop e3, just to stop bishop c5.
Okay. Okay. So good. And I'm going to call in one more person here. So this is Aradia. I'm pronouncing it wrong, I'm sure. So
yeah, so I thought
white is probably slightly better here since he has the open D file and the healthy pawn structure. And also, I think the best move like here would probably be like bishop h6. And also I was looking at rook d7, but bishop d6 seemed really annoying.
Okay, good. By the way, how do I pronounce your name correctly? I think I lost him. That's okay. We'll figure it out another time. By the way, while we're thinking about this, Adi, we're going to call him Adi. That's what he says in the chat. I'm happy to call on more people. One thing that I want to stress about this kind of position is, I think in the foreseeable future, we are going to actually be playing tournaments again, and Greg is going to get his US chess school running again. And to me, this would be a great position to have people play out against each other and then see afterwards, how the actual game went. And of course, you could do a cool thing where if you chose white, you would be the person playing white, and the people who chose black could be black. Okay. So, all right. So let me show you this. I did a little trick on you a little bit. There's a small trick I did. Maybe this is psychological, maybe. Alekhine is in fact black in this position. And I think maybe by putting white on the bottom, it might have suggested that it was Alekhine who was white. And then so you might have been a little tricked. Now I'm going to open this board a little bit, and it's just so you can see the names. And this guy, Sinosko Borovsky, was an old timer that I think wrote a book that I read when I was a kid, but I can't really remember too well. The position is very interesting, and I think that white has to recognize the danger immediately, or he's going to be worse. And the general idea I'm going to show like this. I'm going to show what me just before the broadcast, me and Greg were kind of just kibitzing, and I'll just show you the variation that Greg played. So with bishop e3, rook ad8, I think Greg played f3, f5, king f1, king f7, king e2, king e6. And at this point, it's just fascinating, because at this point, black is definitely the one pressing. I'm not going to claim he's winning or anything like that, but he's pressing. And you can see it in a variation like this. We keep a rook on, and our king is better than the white king. It's a very interesting situation. And of course, I think at the beginning, most people's intuition would be like, well, if anyone's better, let's go back to the beginning a second here. If anyone's better, it's going to be white because of the split pawns, So that's an interesting prejudice kind of in itself. But also, it's funny, is like in the end game, you'd kind of be, at least I have a mild prejudice toward the pawns on the side of the board, because, maybe you can somehow get a outside pass pawn. But the point is, and we're going to see this in the game, is that the centralization of the king is where things get really interesting and spicy. Okay, so I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the game, and then I think we'll go back. Let's just do this. I'm just going to walk through the game real slow, and then we'll start at the beginning, at the end of it all, and try to figure out if and when black went or white went wrong. Okay, so black played bishop h6, definitely also the intuition of a lot of people here in the class. f5, snip, snip, and now g3. One funny thing, actually, I don't want to talk too much as I walk through this, but when I was studying the game, what I thought was interesting about the move g3 was it, to me, was an example of what people sometimes call the sunken cost fallacy. That is, you make an investment and then you're unwilling to say to yourself, oh, that was not a good investment. And the investment here, what we're talking about, is bishop h6, where now black is worried, rightfully, about f4 and this kind of business, trapping the bishop. So then he, in order to, let's say, rationalize, keep his bishop on h6, which honestly we can see now has absolutely no purpose, right? It's not doing anything there. To keep it there for a little bit longer, white plays g3. Okay. And so we get a position not too different from the variation that Greg had with me in our just little beginning of, we were just messing around a little bit. F3. And, I think a really interesting question to ask yourself here is, how bad is it? Is this a bad situation for white? I think a lot of people would reach this position, just be like, dude, I have to be fine. I have to be totally fine. And maybe, but black is definitely the one who's pressing. Okay, h4, snip, snip, rook h8. Again, the question I'm going to ask you guys is, where did white go wrong? I'm just going to show it to you, and then we'll go back through it again. Stop the rook from entering. b5, a5, a4. Where did he go wrong? Boom, boom. c4. Now, at this point, I guess it's obvious to everybody that it's gone wrong, but it's not maybe totally clear that it's over yet. And then he resigned. Okay, so let's go back to the start. Any ideas, maybe just off the bat, we can go through it again. Any ideas where white went wrong? A lot of people are saying bishop h6 is wrong. I think we got to agree. And by the way, if your bishop h6 was your first instinct, don't feel bad. I mean, it's just like, oh, you attack the rook with tempo. It feels like, oh, that should be the move, All right, Liam is saying rook d3. Let's say rook fd8. I guess I could do the other one too, right? And black is doing pretty good, right? And black doing pretty good there. Yeah. Rook g3 and bishop h6. Okay, boom. Now, king f8 is a little spicy. So if I go here, 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 I guess the claim that I would want to make for black is that we have the d file, and therefore we're the one that is better. But but there might be some, this is a spicy way to play. Sure. Now, Frank is saying, actually, excuse me. Remember, the rules are, I'm not supposed to actually say anything unless you put the exclam. But somebody is saying f4. And then the question to me would be, well, what are you going to do after e4? I think that's, to me, the interesting question. By the way, one thing I want to stress while we're just thinking about this position is all the analysis I did on this game, I just did it, myself with a real board. I did not look at it with a computer. So my ideas are just totally human here. And here we have somebody suggesting f5. Good. I think that is the path. And I think this is roughly equal, though honestly, I think I'd rather be white at this point. Right, I'd rather be white. And I think one of the things I want to stress about this is that it's right away. It's right away in this position where white has to say to himself, oh, we need to stop this thing with f5, king f7, king e6. Once that happens, I don't think you're lost yet, but it's gonna hurt. The hurt is gonna come for sure. The hurt's gonna come. Okay, so one thing I'll stress is I think white can still do the f4 idea now, right? So f4, e4, f5, you can still do it now. But otherwise, I think you're going to get stuck into, even though, for example, Greg's bishop e3 is better than bishop h6, you're still going to get a very similar position to the one that Alekhine gets here, unless white has something amazing, which I don't see. For example, you could also maybe try king f1. To be fair to Greg, was his initial instinct, and maybe something like that is more clever. And I'm willing to believe that that's totally equal as well, though. Well, there's questions. There's questions here. Yeah, still a dynamic game. Okay, so let's get into this. And Alekhine, in his book, writes the following basically about this position. Okay, I'm going to just read it to you. And one of the things that I want you to get out of what he writes here is a kind of global sense of the board. And one of the cool things that I don't think Alekhine invented it, but he really pursued as a kind of macho way of playing the ending is to use what we still call the principle of two weaknesses. So the principle of two weaknesses is just to say that if you want to talk about your position as winning, then what you are going to need is to have two weaknesses. And when we say a weakness, we can talk about a pawn. If you're up a pawn, that's just one weakness. Doesn't mean you're not winning yet. You have a clear advantage with being up a pawn, but you're not winning yet. And there can be multiple kinds of different weaknesses. A weak king, a weak pawn, all kinds of weaknesses that I'm sure you're familiar with. And the idea of the principle of two weaknesses comes about in games like this, where really we would like to have a weakness on both sides of the board and then try to alternate our attack from one to the other. And the image that I like a lot is that of a rubber band being stretched, right? By sending him once this way and sending him once this way. And then over time, as you've probably had your own experience with, the rubber band will get weak and then break, right? So what I'm going to read to you, he doesn't actually use the terminology principle of two weaknesses, but I think you'll hear it from the words. So Black's plan consists of the following parts. Exchange one pair of rooks. That happened. Transfer the king to e6, where it will prevent the invasion at d7 by the remaining white rook. Basically, you see this a lot in King's Indian positions too. The rook is ineffective on the d file. Now, then 3, operating with the rook on the open g file, advancing the h pawn, force the opening of the h file, where we saw that too. After this, white's king and possibly his bishop will be tied to the defense of h1 and h2 against invasion by the rook. Right? Black, meanwhile, by advancing his A and B pawns, will sooner or later open one of the files on the queen side. That's point number 5. 6, since at this point his king will still be on the opposite wing, white will be unable to prevent the invasion of the first or second rank by the black rook. Now, it must be admitted that had white from the beginning realized that there is a real danger of him losing this endgame, by careful defense, he might have been able to save it. But what happened was that black played according to a definite plan, whereas white played only with the conviction that the game was bound to end in a draw. Okay. It goes on from there, but I'll stop there. And again, let's look at this. Let's go through it one more time. At this point, too, one Russian phrase that I like is the idea that it's hard to give good advice, and that's how I feel it in the following positions. Like it's hard for me to know. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Why not like King F2 instead of Bishop F2? Defend that pawn.
Okay, let's look.
I just want to go like King G2 instead of Bishop G1. Like Bishop G1 seems weird.
I'm with you. Yeah. So we could play Rook H8 or just HG directly, I guess, right?
Yeah, I was gonna go King G2 with Rook H8.
Let's play B5.
Oh, you're gonna do stuff.
I'm just following his plan, Greg. I'm just following his plan.
Well, but like it just feels better to me. I'm not saying it's like that great, but like the Bishop F2 to G1 stuff just seems like it helped a little too much. But I don't know. Maybe I didn't see it close enough.
I had a similar feeling, and I want to respond to a question. Somebody's asking about H3.
Also,
remember,
you got A4 here too. Oh, never mind. Well,
yeah. Let me just first do this question. So the question is, should black play H3 to fix H2? And I want to admit that was also one of the things when I looked at this game, I was like, yeah, maybe we should play H3. But one of the key things I think about the way he played it is actually we want to open the H file. We want to open the H file. I think here, let's say in terms, and now Greg's asking about things like A4. And maybe I'll just say that I'm not convinced here, by the way, that black's winning, just that white is under the gun. And I think that move right there, B3, it looks really innocuous, but I think that's a problematic move because that will allow us to open up the position. Now, the sad thing is, though, that otherwise, if you don't do it, you're going to allow me to play A4, and then you got to try to sit with those pawns on A3. And then, of course, like if my king ever enters, then that's it. Then that's totally it. Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you, Greg. The Bishop G1 does look pretty funny. Okay. Let me show you a variation I thought was interesting. We can look at, by the way, if you want to look at any particular variation, we can. I thought this was a great move, Rook G8. And it took me a while. It took me a while to be like, wait, why is that a good move? And the reason is that you want to prevent G4. At some point, G4. And by the way, if you have a prejudice for white in this position, it would be like, oh, maybe he's going to get an outside pass pawn someday. So Rook G8 and then B5. And one of the key features to me is like, well, isn't white going to be able to use the H file someday? That's how it always happens to me in my games. I open up the H file and then eventually the other guy gets to use it. And I think that critical question is coming right here. B3.
Can I ask, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
What if he played like King E2 instead of B3?
Okay.
Like what's the idea of Rook H1 and if Rook H8,
but then I have
G4?
Rook H8.
Yeah, maybe G4. You know?
Mm-hmm. This looks bad though.
Yeah, it's not pleasant.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're going to see he essentially has that same idea, right? So watch this. One thing that I thought was amazing in the game was this moment right here. And I spent a lot of time kind of scratching my head about this position where I really despise White's next move here, rook d2.
Yeah, could he just oh, sorry, I don't want to go on.
No, go ahead. Your question is obvious.
Well, you
right?
might be about to ask,
right?
You might be about to ask them, but yeah.
So let me just share.
Rook h1, or what about even taking on a4 and rook b1? Oh no, then the king's going to walk in.
Exactly. So let's mention that first. So if this and rook b1, I think that's truly the end. Mm-hmm. I think that's truly the end, because once my king gets there, it's like, oh man. And there's zero counterplay for White on the queen side. Okay. So the real question is like rook h1. And I want to say on a practical level, never go passive like that. Oh my God. That makes me scream. That's the kind of thing I would scream at. But okay, let me just say that the first couple moves that he makes where he does not play f4, right? So where the guy plays bishop h6 and then allows me to set up this juggernaut here with king e6. We could say something like, okay, that was superficial play. And then I thought rook d2, now maybe he's in trouble already anyway, but rook d2 was the move I was like, no, you can't play just like that.
Sorry to bother you.
That's fine. Go ahead.
This b3 move, I know you already mentioned it, but like, if White doesn't do that, like it.
So let's try it out.
It seems like it just gives Black all these ideas, right? To get another open file on the A file.
I'm with you. Let's try. So why don't play White?
First of all, what is White even trying to accomplish with that move?
I think he's trying to set up a barricade on the c4 square so that his rook doesn't always have to worry about this.
Yeah, you could do that after the king's in d5. Right? Okay, I don't know. Just make a what move to make? What did you think he should do instead of b3?
I think his only chance is at some point he's going to have to just try to sit with a3, and then the challenge is going to be that then your rook can never move off the d file once that happens. Then
can I ask why do we have to go a3 even?
Because when I play a5, a4, you're going to have to worry about a3 and also c5, c4, a3.
Could I wait? Could I go b3 after a3?
Could I go? Well, it depends if my pawn's on c4 or not. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, once you play c5, then I'll reconsider.
Well, okay. Well, but let's just for everybody's and including my own, let's just play a little, try it out. So go ahead, Greg. Just I have a feeling you just want to sit, but
Yeah, I just want to see like what will happen if we don't play like these pawn moves. They don't feel helpful to me. I'm gonna just rook d2, I guess.
Okay.
I don't know. Just,
rook d1, that's fine.
I mean, I don't feel good about it, but like I just kind of want to see how it goes.
Okay.
Go rook d2. Right. Okay, I'll try this. No, I'll just keep sitting.
Okay.
Now a3.
No, okay. Let me I should think about it for a touch too.
Yeah.
So, because the problem for me, of course, is when I play c4, then I've blocked my own king out, right?
One thing's for sure, if we're reduced to moving our rook back and forth, I mean, maybe White has a better plan than this, but it does prove that Black has the practical chances, right? And that's sometimes all you can ask for in a position like the one we had earlier.
let me just see this again. So c5 makes sense to me. Rook d1. And now, right. So let me just say the problem that black has is how do I open the position on the queen side? Okay. How about, all right, I'm not super sure, but I'll try that, a3.
Let's do the normal. Let's try b3.
And then I'm not 100% on this either, but I'll try c4.
Let's try there's two choices. I can go b4 or I can take and put b1, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Let's take it. I like b4 too. They all look good. I don't know if everyone. I'm sorry. I'm like taking over the class.
No, it's fine.
I haven't been in one of these for a while, so it's exciting, and I love this endgame. It's very interesting.
And I'm not sure about it myself.
Yeah.
Let me ask this. So before we look at it, the real kind of big question is does black even have anything?
All right, Liam has his hand up. I'm curious what he's.
All right, so I'm going to call Liam, but we'll come back to these questions in just a touch here. So, all right, Liam, help us out here. And maybe we'll go back just to reorient ourselves. We'll go back to this move, b5.
Well, can you go to the position after c4?
Sure, Oh, this one or this one?
No, yeah, this one. I was thinking that white actually in this position could take on c4, and after b takes c4, rook b1. I thought it made sense to go rook b8 to try to not give up the file, but then white can take, and after bishop b8, bishop c5. Black's only move is bishop d6, and after it takes, this should be winning for white because he has the outside pass pawn.
Oh, winning for white. Interesting.
I think so, because let's say g4 at some point and bring the king to the center. Black's king is going to be distracted on the king side.
Okay. It's totally possible. I don't know about winning, but it is totally possible that I'm too soon with my own c4 there. Okay, but good. Thank you, Lynn. Yeah. Okay. So I think by the way.
I think you were right. Your instinct was that b3 was a bad move, right, for white.
Well, also I have to say this is a game that has been studied immensely.
Okay.
And in the notes, there's definitely agreement that b3 is incorrect.
Okay.
And so that's one of the reasons I really was into you pushing me on the matter. Like,
sure.
What do we do, buddy? What are we gonna do? And so let's try to be clear on black's problems. I have a trouble moving the rook on g8 because once I do, I have to worry about g4.
What about a plan? No, I'm thinking like get the rook to c6, like a5, rook a8, rook a6, please. And then do something. I don't know what exactly.
Like, how about this? Like, let's say I do this and you're sitting, and before I even play anything fancy, let's say I do this a3 thing. I don't know. I'll do it. You want b3, you want b4?
b3.
Yeah, this is kind of fun. Okay, and then let's play c5.
c5. So what if I keep doing nothing?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not totally sure about this. So the idea is that when.
Let me ask you this. So what if you did that? Maneuvered the rook to c6?
Okay.
Instead of c5.
What to c6? Remember though, now that's totally possible. But the second I move the rook from g8 to g4, I'm worried about g4. It doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to be a thing, and especially now, I think my
loses a pawn now.
my notion was that if the pawn is here, we have this weakness. We should start looking at things like e4 and bishop e5 at some point, you know, and maybe we do c5, c4 first.
Okay.
Like the idea is obvious that this pawn's going to be weak. How about this, Greg? c5, rook d1. Let me try this one, and then we should probably go back to the game.
Sure. I'll stop torturing you.
It's okay. No, I'm enjoying it a lot. Do you want to play g4? That would be the question for me. Otherwise, I'm going to play c4.
No, you win a pawn. You take and go rook g8, right?
I guess it's that simple.
So
yeah.
I can't play g4. I just wait, and this time you force b4. Is that your?
Well, right.
I could play rook b1 actually. Oh no, rook b1 is interesting. But I don't know. You could probably go c4 anyway.
I might play c4 anyway, and now, of course, you have to worry about this at some point.
Yeah.
d5. That's actually I don't think you can take on c4.
I can take and go bishop e1, maybe, right? It's kind of like seems playable-ish. Oh, Liam has it. Oh, are you tricking me? You tricked me?
I might trick you. You might be able to just sit, actually. Maybe I'm tricking myself. maybe you just sit and I'm tricking myself. Yeah, I have to be a little careful.
It's interesting. Liam has his hand up again. He's figured out
let me call
somewhere we messed up.
He probably does. Okay, Liam, what do you got?
Can you go to the position where you're going to play c4 as black?
Okay, sure. So we were like right here.
I was just wondering, why do you want to play c4? Because if you play c4 after b4, can't white just later maneuver the bishop to c1 via e3 and a3 is weak?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Good question. And part of it is that I have to do something. And the hope would be, Black's hope, I'm not saying this is true, but Black's hope would be that if you went and did this, first of all, it would take you a lot of time. And even if I gave you all those moves and then played rook a8, you move the bishop and I take the pawn, I would have achieved something meaningful. And the idea, of course, is that this guy is weak. And if I win him, I'm willing to sacrifice a lot to win him at this point too, both time and energy and maybe material. At some point, I'm going to be looking at that, right? That's the thing I'm going to be looking at, right? Now, I think it could get a lot more involved too, because when we are looking at this position, by the way, let's say, in fact, we are looking at, let's say A3, B3, and I played C5. Maybe at this point, white should be saying to himself, hey, let's play. It's funny, actually, King G2 with the notion that if rook C8, then I can think about G4. But notice in this position, the rook is not ready to come to B2. So there's a lot of finesse in this position, maybe even with some zugzwangs, because I can play C4 a lot easier if your rook is on D2 than I can when you're on B1. Okay, good. All right, Greg, I want to show at least one more example before we end.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk anymore, but I think the main thing, I think it's hard for some people to understand why if black goes C4 and white goes B4, why isn't it just totally fine for white?
Okay.
I think that's what Liam is wondering.
Yeah, let's ask the question, right? Let's ask the question, right? So we're right here. And
you're trying to go E4, bishop E5 stuff. Is that? Oh, you can go.
I can go bishop E7 and then bishop F6.
You can go E4 now.
I might be able to. Yeah. No, it's pretty. And this is part of the problem when you put the king on G2. Yeah. You're exposing yourself, and in fact,
that was your move. That was your move.
Well, but I wanted.
I'm kidding.
I wanted to do something for him. I wanted to do something. But that's very true.
It's interesting, this E4, bishop E5. But okay, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let you do your thing.
Okay, no, that's fine. No, I really enjoyed it.
It's too exciting, chess is so exciting.
Well, and let me just say, this endgame to me is a big revelation in terms of just like how fast White got himself into trouble. And then the question is totally legitimate. Like, well, could White have, done something? And my instinct, by the way, over here was that in the game it went A5, King G2, A4, and to my mind, Rook H1 was by all means the right move, just on principle, because I want the rook to be active, and then I spent this whole like time looking at AB, Rook H, Rook A8, and I couldn't make it work. And then I just realized much later, I was like, wait a second, Black now with Rook H1, you just play King D5, and it's a very pleasant ending. It is a simply very pleasant ending. And a big part of it is there's no counterplay. Everything's nailed down for Black. So for example, if Rook H5, well, then we'll just play F4. And we're still looking to do things like AB and Rook over and Rook in. And we just need one of these pawns to move. And our king is going to, it's going to start making inroads. Okay, good. So again, I'll go through the ending real quick, and then I want to show another example. I actually have loads of examples. I had no idea how long this is going to take. But that's okay. Check to the miserable king. So you win the pawn, but it's not necessarily over, There's some nice variations here. And one of the things we'll stress, I want to stress how energetic the play is here for Black. Like Black isn't simply just trying to win his pawn and coast it home. No, he's trying to mate. And I know Alyoshin or Alekhine wasn't the first to invent mating in the ending, but I think he was definitely like one of the main dudes to push it. And yeah, we're playing against the king. We have been for quite some time. Okay. I have loads of examples, but just on this subject, I'm going to actually go to my, I'm going to go to my final example here. And I actually didn't have it properly pulled up, but I can get it real easily. And talk about this one just because it's very similar. Oh, actually, let me show you something fun about this last game before we go to the final example. Let me show you how the game went. Actually, let me move this if you guys, maybe you can see that. This is an old-timey variation. And in this position, one of the things that's fascinating is I think a lot of players, I'm going to guess almost all of them, would have gone snip, snip, snap. And the game is very equal. And GF6, it's going to, I think, technically also be equal, but it's going to create the potential challenge that White has here in the ending, where F5 and the centralization of the king is going to come. Zoe, or excuse me, I'm trying not to call on people unless they put an exclamation, but the question is, what's the reason why Black is better in the starting position? And the answer is, I don't think objectively that Black is better in the starting position, but White does have, Black has a plan, and White has to do something about it. And my recommendation was F4, F5 immediately, like right here, boom, boom. Also, he could have played Bishop H6 and then F4, but I think we kind of had agreement that Bishop H6 wasn't a great move either. But something like this to stop the plan, really, of centralizing the king is going to be, I think, what White needs. But if he doesn't understand it, then there's going to be some drama. Okay, so let's go to the next example. So Alekhine was also Black in this game. And let's just go through this interesting position. Let's start here. One thing you might notice is there's some similarities here with black having big fat pawns in the center. And another thing that's similar is that in this position, white also tried to trade queens. Okay, so one thing about Alekhine that I think is very useful to kind of think about is that in the olden times, and a little bit still today, there are people who have prejudices for or against the queenside majority and the kingside majority. And it took me a long time as a player myself to really understand the, let's call it qualitative differences. The reasons for believing in the queenside majority, I think, are mostly obvious, because what you're saying is, you're saying, oh, I'm going to go make a passed pawn and I'm going to win with that passed pawn. The kingside majority is a lot less obvious, but I think one of the things that we got a little taste of in the first game, even though it wasn't technically a kingside majority, is that when you've got the central control and you're able to bring your king to the center, you're going to bully the white king. And at the very least, even if you don't mate the white king, you're going to make the white king into an inferior piece. Okay, let's look at the game here for a second. Rook d8, g3. I think this game you can have full sympathy for white. Not to say that, you think maybe that white's better, but just to say, hey, white can't be worse. But actually, things get pretty hectic right here. And let's take a moment, actually. This is black to move. What should he do? Yeah, so I'll ask that as a question if somebody wants to take a shot at it and maybe explain. White's, I'll try to channel white for a second here. And I believe white could just say to himself, hey, yes, maybe my king's worse, but I'm going to get this beautiful passed pawn very soon. All right, we got Adi. Hope I'm getting that right. And he's going to go here. All right, Adi, what do you got for us?
Yes, I was thinking to go bishop takes c4, and white's gonna go rook takes c4, and then rook d3. And I was thinking black would be like much better and probably even close to winning, because like white's probably gonna go like a4, and like black can go like king e5, and yeah, I think and white's king is really bad, so I think he has a great position.
Okay. No, I think you're totally right, especially about the white king being bad. But let's just play a move or two out. Now, maybe b5 for white, but if we go here, 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 not so easy, right? Because king d5, I can play c6.
I have a question, although I bet it's the same one that Liam has. Is this hand up? What if c6 in the very original after rook d3?
Fair enough. Fair enough. Also c6. Very good. Yeah, that's right.
We'll take and go rook a6.
And so in all these variations, I guess what you can see is you can see white's dreams, right? White's dreams are very simple. He's got that extra pawn on the queen side. And I'm sure you guys have all had some kind of similar thing where you've got a pawn on the queen side majority and you roll that thing, and black has weaknesses over there on the queen side and they're hard to defend. Yeah. All right, let me go back to the original position. So given that, any other ideas for black? Any other ideas for black here? We've got somebody suggesting rook d2. That definitely makes sense. In a way, that's going to be a similar position to bishop takes rook d3. Zoe knows the move. because it was seen in a book before. And so that's great. By the way, I'm very impressed when people can remember games. Greg actually recalled it as, maybe not the precise moves or anything, but had a vague recollection of this game, which even if you ask me in a month or two from now, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to totally remember it. Okay, so let's look at what happened. Bishop C8.
I knew it.
Let's try to just wrap our minds around it for a second. So the bishop can serve to blockade the C pawn. And then in the meantime, this is really important, we're going to push in the center and with the F pawn. And the key thing to see about the F pawn that's not immediately evident is that black is going to be the one with the initiative against the white king. And when we play F4 as well, we're also going to be liberating our bishop. A interesting thing about chess that took me forever to understand is that when you conceive of a position like this, I think it's useful to say that now black has 3 pieces playing and white really only has 2. And that numerical advantage should probably eventually, make itself felt. And I think that's one of the things we see in this game. So let's check it out. A4, G5, B5, both sides following the plan. F4. Yeah, it's definitely a little bit unpleasant. King F1, Rook D2. King E1, Rook B2. Now, I think already white has to worry about things like E3 takes and F3. And again, the bishop's really useful. He's sitting back there, but now all of a sudden you can see he's vicious because he might come to G4 in variations to hit this, and also this one to hit the queening square. It's really remarkable because when you go back just a couple moves, like here, it's not at all obvious, that we are going to be marching those pawns in any meaningful way. And maybe another thing I can just say on a more general level that's kind of interesting is that even though we're in an end game, you can think of it as in an analogous kind of way to a middle game where you have an attack on both wings, right? So in this case, white is attacking on the queen side, black is attacking in the middle and the king side. And like those positions that we've all seen that are crazy in the middle game, what's true of those and what's true of this one is if you have the initiative, then that's a very valuable thing to have the initiative in a position where there's attacks on both wings. Initiative is always important, but there's some positions really, I think it's more important, right? Attack on both different wings. That's a great example. Bishops of opposite color is another good example. Okay, so let's go. Bishop E2, King E5, C6. Everything about white's play has been very predictable so far. Pawn takes. And here's the bummer. If you play pawn takes, how do you intend to advance the thing? Very difficult. That's a sad move. And I think it's already gone here. Very gone. And then white resigns. So, yeah, really stunning example. And to my mind, very similar to the first one, right? Where you're using the centralized king to bully both sides of the board, right? Not just the one side of the board. Okay, I have 2 more examples. We're probably just going to be able to taste one of them, but let's do this one here. Very interesting position. All right, in this position, it's white to move. Obviously, white has the advantage. But I'll tell you what, if anyone want to say what they think both white should do and what they think the dynamic of the position is, I think that would be interesting. All right, we have a request to send the PGN of the last game. I think that's something I can do. Let's see. Yeah. So, right, I actually just did it in the chat. I hope that's kosher. One comment is transfer king to king side, then push B2 and win. Yeah. All right, let's bring Adi in here. Adi, what do you got for us?
Yeah, so I don't have any idea, but I was thinking that if we trade the queens off, I think white almost guaranteed to win because like he can go on like the king side and the knight will be tied down to the to like the guard of the B pawn. And yeah, I think that just if that happens then it's really good, but it's pretty hard to make that happen.
Okay, good. We have a comment here without an exclam that says white could also push the H pawn to H6 to make two weaknesses. Definitely interesting. Yeah. And the main reason I showed this example, by the way, I'm going to give a little speech, and then if you have an idea of what white should do as a first move, it's kind of an interesting challenge. So the speech I'm going to give about this position is that I think most players would see this thing. Actually, I know this to be true also about myself. They would see this position and say, welp, the only game in town is me pushing that B pawn, right? The only game in town is me pushing that B pawn. Well, it's actually kind of hard to push the B pawn and just win by brute force. And one way to understand that is twofold. The knight can control the dark squares, and black has the I was going to call it the overhand. That's not really a word. He's got the upper hand on the dark squares. I like overhand. He's got the overhand on the dark squares. And plus, once you start pushing the pawn, you are opening your king up to a bunch of nasty checks. We got queen b4 as a recommendation, definitely interesting. And while actually we're waiting for somebody to maybe make a claim, I'll say one of the things that's interesting is there's a common prejudice out there that the queen and knight is a great combination in itself, suggesting that it's better than the queen and the bishop. And I think where that comes from is a bunch of people have been mated and they have that very visceral memory of when a queen and knight started dancing all over your king, and it was very painful. That's happened to everybody. But I think it's wrong for a couple of reasons. The positions where the queen and the knight flourish are positions where the knight would flourish anyway, where there's some local weaknesses and the knight can dance around. That's where the knight is beautiful. But of course, in a position like this, where we've got pawns that are stretching the board and the knight needs to, talk to both sides of the board, it's definitely going to be the bishop who's better, whether we have the queens on or not. And I think what the queens mostly do is they make the game much more complicated, And if I wanted to trade the queens, to my eyes, it would just be so much more kind on my soul to trade the queens, because I'm just, it's so hard to keep the black queen out from messing with us. Anyways, I'll just mention to finish this thought about the queen and bishop is a statistical study was done and asked it, and it's a simple question, well, who won more of the queen and bishop versus queen and knight? And it was in fact the queen and the bishop. And, it was kind of a funny thing, because the idea of the queen and knight is still out there to a large extent. You'll hear very strong players even saying it still. And let's just say the obvious. The bishop, bro, what a beast in the endgame. What a beast. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, excuse me, that's not 9, 10, 11. And it can go up to 13. And the knight, of course, 8 at the maximum. And right here, he's got 4. In any case, let me show this great move. Queen d4. Beautiful, centralizing move, taking away loads of squares. And it's anti-intuitive. It's not the first move people think of, because most people, including myself, would be like, hey, I need to hold on to that e1 square. But of course, the beauty here is that queen's covering everything. Even like if we go down here, it's even covering this entrance square and this one. And it's pointing to a very simple truth, which is that late in the game, the queen really wants to centralize. Okay, we don't have that much time left, but I'll just kind of breeze through this beautiful game here. What are we doing? We're creating a second weakness. H7 is that weakness at the moment. Beautiful. Very hard. Very great thing to remember, by the way, just the fact of, these two pieces dominating everything in the middle of the board. We got our queen trade. Thank you very much. Makes it look easy now. End of the game. Okay, you guys, I enjoyed it very much. And hopefully Greg will let me on at some future point, and I can debate him further on some of these endings. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. That was fun.
Bye.